The reading is from my friend Catherine Houck, who is a Union minister in upstate New York, and I've known her from Star Island for many years. She has had medical challenges in the last several years with failure of her liver, and she just got a transplant a few months ago with a donor who was a total stranger to her. With her permission, I'm using her blog entry from June 1st, which brings together a lot of the lines of experience that were going on with her. The Empty Shell, blog entry June 1st, 2016 by Catherine Houck. Yesterday, it all built up to a crashing crescendo. It concluded with an empty shell. First, the many years of losses and mourning, concern of friends and family, grinding exhaustion, physical pain, the lost years, not knowing, isolation, my increased confusion and stupidity, misunderstandings, dullness, dealing with insurance and medical labyrinths, estrangements, fear of not completing what needed completion, waiting, and waiting. Those many experiences and states of being that are part of the challenge of progressive, life-threatening, incurable chronic illness. Second, the sheer brutality of being laid open, of having 3 organs removed to be replaced by part of a stranger's liver, the challenges of recovery from major surgery, 52 staples, the virus right after surgery, the tiny unwelcome house guests at the B&B near the hospital, the crushing side effects of super powerful drugs, weakness, pain, unsteady recovery with setbacks and more surgery, isolation because of immunosuppression, and coming to terms with who I am now and what my life might be like in the months and years to come. Add to that the unbelievable generosity of the complete stranger who saved and hopefully prolonged my life, the excellent medical care, the steady love and support of family and friends, the prayers, kind words, and actions, the flowing, healing energy and hard work of the people who came forward to make it all possible. My burgeoning new energy, return of my ability to converse, to read, to walk and dance, to experience emotion and joy. Through this many-year ordeal, I realized that I could stay relatively calm, endure what needed to be endured, and even laugh at the many absurdities. Until yesterday. Yesterday, I had a meltdown. Totally. Railing, raging, weeping, groaning, letting it all pour out of me in the safe container of my home, in the presence of my caring, loyal, beloved witness. Through the open windows of such a beautiful spring day, I'm certain neighbors and passers-by got an earful. No one called the police. It was a powerful, necessary process of emptying. This morning, I awoke feeling lightness, a profound peace, almost as though I am a husk, an empty shell. The air is clear and fresh. What had seemed impossible now feels possible. Not easy, but possible. Life and love are very much with me. The world rocks me in her cradle as I continue by fits and starts to heal, awaken, and enter this next phase of Catherine. spiritual but not religious? How did you deal with your pain? That was the question Reverend Marcia West asked Nancy Cole when she first met her decades ago. Marcia gave the eulogy at the memorial service here last week for her old friend and popular local artist, Nancy, who had been a sometime attender at this meeting house. When Marcia had first met Nancy in a group of women, Nancy had revealed in the social chat some of the horrendous things in her life that she had been through. A daughter died. A son was born with severe medical problems. And as she was getting up to leave, Marcia asked her that question: how do you deal with your pain? And she sat back down and stayed and talked for several hours more, and that became the beginning of a long and deep friendship. Do any of us deal with the hard stuff that life hands us? Lately, I've been dealing with painful ghosts of my past, and dealing with some of you, dealing with ghosts of your past. Some of the hard stuff that happens to us gets resolved. Sometimes maybe the forces of justice take over and right the wrong or heal the hurt. And then some injuries get buried in a vault deep inside of you because they are just too painful. Because you couldn't live your life if you had to visit them every day. When you reach the end of your rope, when the heebie-jeebies hit, you can do what my friend Catherine did. You can have a whole day set aside for screaming. Or if you drown your sorrows with alcohol or drugs, you can get Waldo. It's not the recommended strategy, but it's a common enough one. What I'm talking about here can be seen as spiritual issues. It can also be seen as religious issues, emotional issues, psychological issues. These are all frames of reference for dealing with what life throws at us. When you hear the words, I'm spiritual but not religious, you're often on an airplane, and you've decided to try to get to know your seatmate. Maybe you've revealed that you're a minister, or maybe you've let on that you're active in a local congregation and you get a lot out of it. It's one of the focal points of your life. When you get this reply from your seatmate, I'm spiritual but not religious, you might have pushed some buttons. It's kind of a defensive answer from someone anxious to show that despite the fact that he or she isn't actually involved in a church, he or she is a good person, a person of depth. The other time this phrase comes up is in my office, when the next of kin of a person who rarely, if ever, set foot in the meeting house on Sunday morning while alive, now wants to hold a memorial service here. The husband or son might explain, Mary grew up in a strict Catholic family, but left that faith in her 30s, and since then, she's been spiritual but not religious. Mary might have had a daily meditation practice, might have attended yoga retreats 4 states away, might have studied Reiki or led a journaling group, but most Sunday mornings she was not moved to walk into open church services. Is that a comment? As a practicing minister who struggles daily to attract new members to the congregation she serves, I always have 2 opposed reactions to statements such as these. On the one hand, I'm all in favor of people seeking spiritual fulfillment wherever they can find it. I do, and I expect anyone else to do as well. Most Sunday nights will find me at O'Shea's Old Inn in West Venice, playing Irish traditional music. It's my spiritual practice. The spiritual quest is not packaged in a box like a commodity. It is not subject to being bought and sold. Although every small town in America in this 16th year of the 21st century is dotted with small enterprises geared towards spiritual activities. No, I don't begrudge anyone their quest for things of the Spirit. But I am appalled by the suggestion implied in that phrase that you can't find spiritual fulfillment within a religious congregation. Maybe you've outgrown the church of your childhood, but have you looked into other denominations and faiths? Have you ever joined a religious community, a covenanted group where members voluntarily enter into a system of accountability to each other? Now, those of you who have used this phrase about yourself may know what you mean by the words spiritual and religious. Both are very elastic and somewhat vague terms. But my fundamental problem with the phrase is that it betrays what, to my mind, is a misunderstanding of both these terms and the relationship between them. In Alice in Wonderland, Humpty Dumpty tells Alice, "When I use a word, it means what I choose it to mean, neither more nor less." We can each have our private meanings of words, but if we want to talk to each other, we're going to have to choose meanings which are more or less common. This is an acute problem with words like spiritual and religious. In the middle of my candidating week for one of the churches I served previously, I was at an open forum where the members could ask the candidate any questions they wanted. One of the members was a full professor at Harvard in one of the sciences, and he asked me if I could define spirituality. I answered something like this. Spirituality is a word which, almost by definition, is beyond definition. We humans, let me give you that again. Spirituality is a word which, almost by definition, is beyond definition. We humans live in a world of words. We are the meaning-making animals. But words go only so far. They don't capture the whole experience. Where mysteries are vast, where emotions are high, where meaning breaks down, there are many parts of human experience which are beyond the capacity of words to capture. And those are what we may call the realm of the spirit. Definitions are words used to describe the meanings of other words. The spirit itself is beyond words, and thus spirituality is beyond definition. The professor responded, "I've never heard anyone explain it so clearly." Take the reading I did a few minutes ago, where my friend describes how all she has been through dealing with a serious medical issue finally came boiling out of her a few days ago, and she just screamed. You could call this an account of emotions. You could call this an account of psychology, but you could also call it a spiritual account. My friend is ordained as a UU, but practices as an interfaith minister. She might have expressed the same account in more traditionally religious terms. Using the 23rd Psalm, she might have said that she's been traveling through the valley of the shadow of death. Or using the parable of the Good Samaritan, she might have said she discovered who her neighbor was when this perfect stranger stepped forward and volunteered to donate part of her liver. She might have questioned with Job why these physical sufferings were being visited upon her. But she didn't put any of these religious frames on her experience. Rather, she chose to tell us of her feelings of fear, frustration, and the comfort she found in the love of those around her. When I was in divinity school, I once asked a wise friend to help me tease out the distinction between two words we use a lot, which seem to have overlapping meanings: spirit and soul. She pointed out to me that spirit, in most Western languages, is closely related to breath. Spiritus in Latin, pneuma in Greek, ruach in Hebrew, all mean breath, but are used to mean spirit as well. Breath is the principal sign of life. If you came upon someone lying in the woods and you didn't know whether he or she was living or dead, the first thing you would do would be to look for signs of breathing. So spirit seems to be that force which animates a person while the person is alive. Soul, by contrast, is a concept heavily influenced by Plato. It is the essence of a person. Plato believed in a realm of ideas and ideals which were eternal. The idea of a circle, which you can describe in a mathematical formula, is more perfect and therefore more real than any actual circle you can draw. The soul is the essence of the person, and as such may be immortal. The soul of the individual can communicate with God, who is the sum of all souls. So spirit was tied to breath, and thus to a life principle, while soul was more abstract and possibly immortal. But I think it got quite muddy after the ancient times. I've watched several episodes of the new TV series Roots this week and have been deeply moved, not the least reason being that I am the descendant of slaveholders. What comes through this version of the story is the spirit of African Americans under the all too believable oppressions of slavery. And I found myself reflecting on the black spiritual as a way to cope with that misery. The spiritual envisions a home over on the other side, a place where the oppressions of the present will be gone, where all will be free and reunited with their loved ones who have been sold down the river. It has elements of both spirit and soul in the distinction I just made. Something is immortal, but it is also a life force. The black spiritual evolves out of the need for hope in the face of a situation of utter despair. Well, there's a stab at spiritual. Now what does religious mean? It's the adjective form of the word religion. In the history of Christianity, there evolved two basic ways of practicing the faith. One could withdraw from the world into a monastery or convent and take religious vows of chastity, poverty, or silence. Or one could work in the world. The life course of the monks and nuns was called religious, and those who worked in the world were called secular. Before the Enlightenment, there was no such thing as a secular realm as we use that term today, a part of life in which religion of any kind is absent. Rather, religious and secular before the Enlightenment referred to two different ways to practice Christianity. The intellectual revolution that was the Enlightenment, also called the Age of Reason or the Age of Science, changed all that. It envisioned a realm that was secular in the modern sense, and then another realm called religion. The secular realm was a meeting ground for science and philosophy, and it was also a place where separate faiths could speak to each other. Out of hundreds of years of wars between the Protestants and Catholics, the idea arose that the best way to have government is for it to be secular, religiously neutral, for church to be separated from state. Both Unitarianism, in its British and American forms, and Universalism arose from the Enlightenment as reactions to Calvinism. But the Enlightenment is only the beginning of the story. To account for these terms, religious and spiritual as we understand them today, we have to look at some of the institutional and cultural developments of the late 20th century, a time we've all lived through. The liberation movements of the 1950s and 60s ushered in the me decade of the 80s with what was called the human potential movement. That strike a bell with anybody? The human potential movement? Remember Earhart sensitivity training, EST? Rolfing? Workshops designed to replicate the process of being born? Various cults sprang up, but for the average person, yoga and meditation and massage, Sufi dancing offered alternative ways to grow. Get more out of life, it whispered. Grow in wisdom and spiritual strength. And then there was that phrase, New Age. There was a lot to recommend these new approaches. They didn't require a lot of commitment to get started. They had a low threshold. They claimed they accepted you for who you were and didn't judge, though some people found competitiveness even in yoga class. They didn't require any particular belief or adherence to doctrine. That would be all well and good if it did not involve putting down more traditional forms of religion, such as churches and synagogues. Many churches and synagogues started to offer spiritual enrichment programs. Before my time here at UUMH, I understand that there was a long-running spirituality group headed by Faith Lavender. We have an active small group ministry program where you can know and be known by 8 or 10 people and share your lives and thoughts and hearts with them. We've had workshops on coming of age for seniors, on death and dying, on science and religion. Whenever anyone asks for a meditation session, I'm glad to oblige, winter or summer. But what I want to highlight is not that we can, as a church, have spiritual programs, but the spirituality is a core part of who Unitarians are. We accept people of all theological beliefs, as you know, but some beliefs are more common than others. And today's UU practice and feeling, particularly among the clergy, is predominantly Transcendentalism. Transcendentalism was a rebellious movement, both within and outside Unitarianism, from the 1830s to the 1860s. That was its heyday, but we're still living under its shadow. It shook up Unitarianism in its era in a way that's hard for me to convey today. Transcendentalism's great religious manifesto is Ralph Waldo Emerson's Divinity School Address from July of 1838, which shocked the Unitarian world of his day, so much that he, a Harvard alumnus and one of the most popular speakers on the American lecture circuit, was not invited back to Harvard for 20 years afterwards. And what is the Divinity School Address? The graduating class of ministers that year invited this notorious radical to address them. Emerson painted a picture of a world governed by natural law, which included moral law. God was essentially the laws of nature. That is to say, he's shifting ground as to whether God is supernatural or natural. Maybe God is within the laws of nature. Religion consisted in the transcendent experience of each individual, and it was beyond words. It could not be taught secondhand. Sound familiar? Religion, spirituality, religion, spirituality. The fiery heart of religion is this first-hand experience. But when it is retold, when it is written down, when it becomes a movement with disciples and followers, this experience loses its divine inspiration and turns into its opposite. Quote, Jesus said in this jubilee of sublime emotion, I am divine, through me God acts, through me speaks. Would you see God see me, or see thee when thou also thinkest as I now think? But what a distortion. This is still Emerson. What a distortion did his doctrine and memory suffer in the same, in the next, and in the following ages. There's no doctrine of the reason which will be let me go back. There is no doctrine of the reason which will bear to be taught by the understanding. The understanding caught this high chant from the poet's lips and said in the next age, this was Jehovah come down from heaven. I will kill you if you say he was a man. Unquote. Jesus was divine, but only in the same sense that you and I are divine. It was a distortion or even a reversal of what Jesus actually taught to say he was God himself. Jesus was first and foremost a great spirit, a poet of the spirit. Emerson concludes by telling the aspiring ministers, yourself a newborn bard of the Holy Ghost, cast behind your all conformity and acquaint men at first hand with deity. Acquaint men at first hand with deity. What Emerson was trying to get at is what today's spiritual seekers mean by spirituality. In our religion, in other words, we incorporate spirituality at its core. That's why it drives me up a wall for someone to say, I don't come to your church and my deceased loved one didn't, because of being spiritual, not religious. We are the church, which is anti-dogma, anti-doctrine. Our universalist society teaches that God is not a gray-bearded old man in the sky, perpetually angry and hurling thunderbolts. No, God is love. And love is the most powerful force in the universe. Many of us don't believe in God, but we try to believe in love. Now, there are plenty of religions which say they're founded on love, and the test for all of us is how well we practice it. We don't hold ourselves out as superior to any other faith. We try to make people feel good about themselves, to see the joy in life. We don't beat them over the head with their sins. We try to practice living in a covenanted relationship, the beloved community, Bring about the beloved community here on earth. Don't worry about what's going to happen to you after you die. A covenanted relationship where we're each accountable to the others for our actions. Yes, we wander off in the woods and find communion with nature in our inmost selves and read about Mary Oliver and Thoreau and Henry Beston doing the same. But we also come together in community, where, as I said 2 weeks ago, we live our lives among a cloud of witnesses. You have a nice Venn diagram on the order of service cover, which has areas on this religion and areas on the spirituality and an area of overlap. That's nice and logical. You're welcome to study it and make what meaning of it you can. For my part, it seems to me that spirituality is encompassed within religion and vice versa, at least within this kind of religion. They are words for two of many paths up the same mountain. How do you deal with your pain? How do you deal with the stuff that is too huge, too close, too scary for words to have much effect? What do you do with the heebie-jeebies, the night sweats, with the scream inside of you that needs to come out? I don't have any answers, but I know this. You don't have to go it alone. Call it religion, call it spirituality, call it community. When the chips are down, it's good to have someone at the other end of the phone. Amen.